Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Teri Cardula, and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Teri. Hello, and welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. Today, we have Christie Garcia with us. She's the founder of at Mindful Choice Leadership Academy. She's a leadership coach, speaker, and facilitator. She's worked with companies including Airbnb and Twitter. And Christie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Teri. I'm so excited to visit with you and talk to your audience.
Fantastic. So let's hear the backstory real quick about, how you got to be where you're at today.
That's such a big loaded question. It's like, well, how far back do you want to go? I think the most obvious is when I was 29, I was in medical sales, living a really great life, doing my thing, had the great apartment that overlooked the Bay Bridges and the Golden Gate and all the things that I needed, traveling the world, lots of friends. Life was good. And then it came to abrupt stop when I had a fall about 30 foot from my fire escape. And it was a crazy, crazy day. I was incredibly blessed and had very few injuries, just basically more ego and pride injuries than anything else. So not my time to go. So that was kind of one of those moments where it was like, whoa, what am I doing with my life? I had to slow down enough for about 2 or 3 weeks to say, wow, where's, all the people in my world? Like the things are good, the life is good. But I started to realize, luckily I'd already started my journey in the coaching world. Realized that I was unemotionally available to the world. And so I had all these, friends and acquaintances and amazing people in my life, but there wasn't a lot of depth and meaning to the relationships. It was a lot of task stuff, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of things on that surface level. And so when life, gets hard, there's not really a lot of people at the finish line, but my family. And so it was kind of that turning point. I realized something needed to give. I've been talking about starting my own business and, buying a house and doing all the things that we all say we want to do, but they're hard and they're scary and they're just not as fun as, hanging out with friends and traveling and, being a little more whimsical in the world. So I ended up within that year, decided to learn about my own ego, like what was holding me back from being vulnerable, what was holding me back from dating and putting myself out there, what was holding me back from starting my own business, committing to buying a house. I had some serious commitment issues. And I think what came from that year was a lot of self-discovery and the realization that all these people during medical sales, one of my favorite things to do was talk to patients in the hospital when they were by themselves and just kind of learn their story. Why were they by themselves? It didn't make sense to me. And one of the most common things I heard was, I just work too much. I prioritized my career and not my life. And so when it was done, even though I was doing all the hard work for my family to provide for them, to, give them what they needed, they were gone. And it really hit home for me because I realized, wow, at that time, these are mostly 60-year-old men who had retired, or 60 plus men who at that generation, that's what mostly the men were the breadwinners. Well, now you've got women doing it. And so it was that moment of, holy cow, I'm not even going to have a family because I'm working so much. I don't prioritize dating. I'm not doing the things on the personal side. So started to shift, started to build out my own life goals. And it turned into, recognizing how many women and young managers. It started out as kind of people like me. And then I was like, wow, there's just as many men who are in their 30s and 40s doing exactly the same thing, not knowing how to balance life, not knowing how to transition into that we player, not just we at work, not how to be successful there, but how do we get to be successful at home too and do both. So Leadership Academy kind of came about and evolved and started learning about the unconscious behaviors and not just how they're showing up for us personally, but how do they hold us back as leaders? You get all these amazing individual contributors getting promoted. And once they get to that place of promotion or they start their own business, it's like, whoa, it's no longer about me and my success. You got to make sure your whole team gets to that finish line. And so shifting that I perspective to the we perspective is kind of the evolution of how we got to the Mindful Choice Leadership Academy.
Oh, beautiful. Wonderful. So I want to go back to this because I want to go back to this piece about talking about ego, because I love talking about mindset. I love talking about what motivates us, the unconscious blocks, energy. I mean, it's all of it. It's just yummy. And I think for a lot of us, I mean, what you talk about is like, creating that balance. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, a lot of our listeners that are entrepreneurs. And I know that this balance, I mean, there's lots of thoughts around having balance, not having balance, is balance even a thing, but I think going back to, the ego and what is holding us back from having a balance or having, just that life and work connection, because otherwise, I mean, and I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of listeners now listening, if you're in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, even, it is challenging because you're going to work that 50, 60, 70, 80 hours, and you're going to be still doing projects at midnight or after kids are in bed, like, I think this is a real issue as you're pointing out. What would you share with the listeners as far as, some, what was helpful for you in transforming that?
Yeah, I think luckily for me, I preach this stuff. So every morning I'd say, okay, practice what you're going to preach today. But I think the biggest thing is a lot of people, the ego, one of the ego tactics is to keep us busy, to keep us isolated, to keep us overwhelmed, to keep us stressed, to keep us believing that if we don't work those, 40, 50, 60-hour days, then we're not good enough. Our competition will beat us, all those things, right? All the stories. And the problem is, if we continue on that path, it doesn't matter if it's year 1, 2, or 3, those are habits that you've now created. So now 5, 6, 7, 8, you're still doing that. And, until you consciously become aware of these unconscious habits, you'll never be intentional with your time. You'll never be intentional with your schedule. You'll never be intentional with your balance and how you put your family forward versus your, clients. I'm a big believer with every client I have is, shift that mindset. When you're at work, your client is your number one client. When you're at home, your family is your number one client. And so just learning that is a simple way to balance it all, to say, okay, I can shut off here. I have permission to leave my laptop at the office and focus on my family, even if it's just for 20 minutes. If it's focused time, that's more meaningful than 20 minutes of busyness or just checking the box, so it's getting out of the idea that if I just check all these boxes, then I'm doing everything. No, you're really not. You're doing everything, but you're not doing it well. And it probably doesn't feel good. And people know that you're distracted. And so, really figuring out how to shift those mindsets, how to recognize what your stress looks like, what your worry looks like, what your attachment to, success and how you get there. What's your overall goal of success? A lot of times it's so easy for ambitious people to set goals around their careers, and we never set goals around the people. And that could go for the people in your business or the people at home. If you're not setting goals for the people, I want to develop this person to be X. I want to invest time in this individual to get them to point Z. You're never going to do it. You're always going to be too busy. If you're not intentional with how you're spending your time with people at home, you're always going to be late for a soccer game or, forget the family dinner or take that last meeting, because again, tactical things, the tasks are what our ego gets reward from, even though there's no depth or meaning behind it.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I'm right there with you about talking about intentions. I created my daily intentions journals, planners,
Mm-hmm.
for that reason, because when we're
Yeah.
intentional about what are we doing every day, but not
Mm-hmm.
only are we intentional about our work, but all areas of our lives, and,
Yes.
setting those targets early on. But then what are we
Mm-hmm.
doing daily,
Yes.
so that we are incorporating that. And I love tying in the concepts of energy, because I think so often in my experience is like we become human doers, right? Like we
Yes.
do, because ego is right there wanting like those instant gratification. But when we step back into being a human being, and we're being, there's so much more out there
Yeah.
than we realize. And if we are willing to tap into some of it, even in the energy world, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, we can actually I'm going to be doing a solo session in a couple weeks around the power of spending 5 minutes in
Uh-huh.
intentionality with energy, and doing some energy tools. I'm going to teach people how to
Fun.
do these so that they can generate more clients and more money without
Yep.
not checking a box, and so it's
Exactly.
really, really powerful when we can shift that mindset into abundance and possibility mindset versus scarcity and lack and fear that's held back by our unlimited, unconscious
Yep.
beliefs. And one of the things that I actually had to
Absolutely.
overcome for me was the guilt for not. So for me was, I grew up with, you have to work hard, and working
Mm-hmm.
hard meant putting in the hours.
Yeah.
And so you have to work 7 a.m. till 5, or, and so I would leave the office, even when I had my own company. Okay. This is when I had my own company.
Yep.
I would be sitting there like, oh my gosh. So my office used to be in the front of the office. So I'd have to walk out. And so people would know when I left. Right
Yep.
now, my office is hidden, and so no one sees me. But I remember sitting in my office one day going, I really would like to go, but it's not 5 yet.
Uh-huh.
And my staff are going to know if I leave early. And I feel bad because, staff's working here and they're going to work here until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I'm going to leave
Yep.
at 5. And it was so funny. I had such guilt for leaving
Mm-hmm.
early. Right. And it was ego, right? It was ego.
Yeah.
And so I had to do some of my own work on myself to be like, okay, I don't have to feel guilty because I've done the work
Yes.
and blah, blah, blah. And so, but it was a big shift for me. It was a big shift. And I think there's a lot of folks like out there that feel that same way, right? That feel,
Absolutely. I've got several clients who that's what they, so there's two different egos well, all the egos are focused on our image, but the controller ego is really focused on image, and the complier ego is really focused on people, right? And so
yeah,
they kind of compete, where the complier is like, oh, I don't want to upset anybody, or I don't want to think of them, it's not fair. Where the controller ego is like, oh, but make sure everybody knows you are the best at what you do, and everybody's, you lead by example. And sometimes you have to recognize that, I had a client, he had to be at the office first, so he'd get there he was in construction, so 5:45, just to be in the vicinity before everybody else did. And then he would leave late, just like everybody else, but it was for the same reasons. And, going back to leadership, what you have to remember is, as a leader, your job isn't, if you're just doing tasks, you're not leading. You're not visionary. You can't get out of that tunnel vision. That's the thing. Our brains are either in the to-dos or it's up here in the vision. And you got to learn to dance and go back and forth, but you have to be intentional to come from here to here. And if you don't, that's when you get stuck in that ego trap of, I've got to look busy. I've got to do this. I got to look important. And you start doing stuff that's just not really that important, or you start holding on to tasks that really should be passed along to someone else. And I think that's one of the easiest ways to shift and buy yourself time, is look at it. Am I doing this to impress or do something to hold an image up with someone else? Is there something that I am doing that should be, do the monetary value? We all know monetary value. So a lot of entrepreneurs say, well, I don't pay myself as much as I pay my staff. Well, but if you did, how much would you be paying yourself? And is it worth that price tag versus, let's say, a $20 employee? And so knowing the monetary value of the task is important. The other thing is what is, by you not teaching someone that task, that skill, how are you holding someone else back? You know, a lot of times when we don't delegate, when we don't lead and train people, it's really selfish tactic because it's feeding our own ego to make us feel important and value. Where if you're teaching people and you're giving it away, you're now investing in them. They're going to be better because they knew you, because they worked for you. Whether they stay with your company and you are able to elevate them and you have someone who can do what you're capable of doing, which is amazing, right? If we could all just replicate our knowledge and wisdom as the leaders, you now have 10 leaders in your group. When we hoard that information, it's that whole motivator that I have to sit here. I have to, I've got to be the one that works the longest hours. I got to be the one that, takes the most tasks. I've got to be the one that does all the busy stuff. And really that just means you're not leading, delegating, or growing your team. You're just hoarding and you are going to get burnt out. You're going to not love your company anymore. And it's going to be a job.
I love that. I love everything. I'm just taking some quick notes here around, this concepts, right? Like, you're right. Especially for some of the listeners that are listening that are solopreneurs, I think one of the biggest traps that we get into, even though we don't have a team to lead necessarily, is how do we take that leap of going from one person to the second? And I think that that's usually the biggest leap. And then once you do that once, it's like, oh,
I need more of those. Yeah, that was so genius.
Seriously. So folks that are on the border, or like kind of teetering, tottering, like thinking about, oh, can I afford this person? And when you talk about the monetary value of a task, like some of the clients that I've had, I'm like, okay, like how much is that wasting your time? Because some of that admin stuff can be taken off your list with ease, and you are going to invest way less. And usually it's worth maybe sometimes one client. If you bring on one client, it will often pay for that person.
Absolutely.
Maybe two, depending on your field and industry. And it's not, so I think we get trapped by, oh my gosh, it's going to afford it. I can't afford this. There's no way. I would invite you to look at the numbers, because I think we can afford it way before we think we can. And it's just going to make your life a lot easier. And my other company, we were down a front desk person, and someone was like, well, we can manage the front desk, right? It's not that. But what happens is when we manage that tasks, that my director of operations, my indoor sales, they're not doing their job at their, and their zone of genius the best. So now it takes away their brilliance in a way, right? So now that we have this new person, we're like, okay, and then they go back to their main brilliance roles and what they're designed to do. It was amazing within weeks, 2 weeks. The shift, the massive shift happens.
And on that note, just the engagement, right? If you are one that works long hours, if you are one that will just take on tasks because you can, and now you expect your team to do that, you've got people doing jobs that aren't in their expectations. You've got people that are disengaged because they're getting burnout. You've got people who don't love their job anymore because, like you said, they're doing tedious tasks that aren't, their wheelhouse. And so teaching yourself how to value your time allows you to value everybody else's time differently as well. And it does. Time is money. And as especially, solopreneurs, smaller teams, like time is important. And as the leader, if you're good at going and getting new business, then you shouldn't be doing any tasks. You hire an admin, you get that stuff off your plate and you go find new business. You can now hire 3 new admins, right?
Exactly. And I think this is a message that all of our listeners can listen to and hear and take in, because I think when we let go, because it starts with us, right? It starts with us. So if we are holding ourselves back, and you guys know that have been listening to me and following me, I preach this stuff all the time about getting ourselves out of our way, because once we do that, the other stuff is the easy work. That's the tactical stuff. That's the things that we can teach and lead by. But if we are not getting ourselves out of our own stories, our own limitations, our own restrictions, and our own resistance to doing, or to growing or expanding, whatever that might be, it has a negative impact on it has a ripple effect on everything.
It does. Absolutely. On that note too, is I was just thinking of a client when they were getting ready to start their business. There was so much fear. How am I going to be a mom? How am I going to, do this? And how am I going to do that? And how am I going to run this business? Like there's no time. And so, it was so hard to convince her because she just felt like, oh, that makes me not a good parent or a good housekeeper if I, hire a house cleaner. Because I said, well, you shouldn't be cleaning house on the weekend. You hire that out. You have someone come into your house. So on the weekends, your job is just to be mom and wife. Like, you get to enjoy your family, you get to shut off work, and that's your time to be family time. And it was interesting. It was so hesitant because the ego told her, oh, you're supposed to be the breadwinner, and you're supposed to be taking care of the household, and you're supposed to be doing this, and you're supposed to be that. And, you don't have all the funds because you're just getting started, and that's a waste of money, and all these stories. She hired a house cleaner and her life changed. She's not doing laundry on the weekends. She's not tired. So every spending moment at home, she's with her family. She's not doing all those tedious tasks that we tell ourselves we're supposed to do because, we're the wife, or we're the mom, or we're this, or we're that. And we put this, martyr cap on that we were supposed to do everything. And it's not fair, because then we take it out on our families, right? We get resentful that we're tired. We get resentful that our spouse isn't helping us. We resentful that our kids aren't doing anything. Yeah. And it's such a silly cycle that we get into that's exhausting for everyone. When you invest in people to help you, you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your family, you're investing in your team. So remember, it's selfish not to invest in people to help. It is it's not a leadership tactic at all.
Yeah. And we can spend our more time with the things and people that matter most to us. And like going back kind of full circle with your story at the beginning is like, you didn't have those really rich, yummy relationships that you had fostered. And so, and I remember Harvard did some research years and years ago with 80-year-olds. And they asked all these 80-year-olds, what's your two greatest regrets of all time? And the first one was that they didn't take enough risks in life. And the second one is they did not spend enough time with their family. Yeah. And so those were the biggest, regrets that we have. And so, don't, make choices and changes now that affect the rest of your life. Yesterday, I was being interviewed by this person and she asked me about like a regret that I had and what regrets or something. And I was like, honestly, like the way I live my life today is built and created by design. So I don't have regrets later down life. Like I am making that conscious choice not to have regrets that I didn't do this and I didn't do that, because I have built my business to, work with me in alignment with me and my goals and my targets versus, trying to be everything to everyone all the time. Like, and that's the importance of having team and having, the support system so that you're not doing it all by yourself. So for those that are on the, I will continue to say this, like do the numbers, walk through it, because to grow a team, it does not usually require much. It doesn't. And so once you have one person, that's usually the biggest, hump. And then after that, it's like, it's easy peasy. So
yes, it's true.
Christie, this has been absolutely delightful. Where can people find more about you and the work that you're doing?
They can visit me on mindfulchoiceacademy.com, or they can go on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We're on all the social sites. Definitely reach out. I would love to continue to have conversations around the unconscious behaviors and what are holding you back as an entrepreneur. I think those are the things that we don't ask ourselves enough. Those things we're not even aware of. Ask your team, what are those unconscious behaviors that make you difficult to work with? Yep.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I invite everyone to go check out our information. And if this resonates, take a look and hop on a call with her. Thank you so much, Christie.
Thank you, Teri.
I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at talkingwithteri, that's TERI.com, to book your time.